Noah Shaw's muscles were tired as he pulled into the driveway of his modest Austin home. The Texas sun had set some time ago, leaving behind a muggy evening that clung to his skin. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, his mind still racing from the day's security meeting with the high-profile tech mogul. Something was bothering him. It wasn't about work, which had gone well enough. This unease came from closer to home. Noah's steel-gray eyes flicked to the house, noting the warm glow of the kitchen light. Avery was home. He took a deep breath. He got out of the car and, at 6 feet 2 inches, he was tall. He moved with the easy grace of a man half his age. He was 38. He felt the weight of his concealed firearm against his side as he approached the front door. When he stepped inside, the scent of roasted chicken and herbs hit him. It smelled good. Avery rarely cooked these days unless she wanted something to eat. "I'm home," he called out, his deep voice echoing through the entryway in the kitchen. She turned, flashing him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome home, honey," she said, brushing a strand of perfectly styled blonde hair behind her ear. "How was your day?" Noah studied her for a moment. Avery looked impeccable as always, in designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more. He didn't make that much money, but he made more than she did in a day. She was perfectly dressed, but there was a tightness around her mouth and a slight furrow in her brow that spoke volumes to a man trained to read people. She was busy, so she didn't reply. "Yours," she said. Avery's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, you know, the usual book club lunch with." The girls were nothing exciting. Nobody nodded or pushed further. He learned long ago that Avery's definition of exciting rarely aligned with his own. "Zach?" he asked, glancing around for their son upstairs doing homework. Avery said, turning back to the stove, "Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you?" "Go get cleaned up," Noah grunted, acknowledging the request. He paused at the door to Zach's room, knocking softly before pushing it open. Zach was sitting at his desk, head bent over a textbook at 12. He was already showing signs of becoming the man he'd become, lean and wiry with Noah's dark hair. Avery's green eyes met his son's gaze, and Zach felt his face brighten at the sight of his father. "Hey, Dad," Zach said, pushing away from his desk. "How was work?" Noah felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as he stepped into the room. "Good, buddy, how about school?" Zach gave a shrug that seemed to say, "Not sure." Noah's mind was immediately alerted by the gesture, which seemed a bit too committed. He crouched down beside his son and looked him in the eye. "You sure about that? Everything all right?" Zach looked like he wanted to say something, his eyes darting to the door and then back to Noah. "Yeah, Dad, everything's fine," Noah said, not entirely convinced. He knew better than to push, though, so he just gave Zach a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "All right, but you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Zach nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I know, Dad," Noah said, standing up. "Come on, dinner's almost ready." As they made their way downstairs, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in his house. The warmth and connection he'd felt with Zach only highlighted the growing coldness between him and Avery. Dinner was a tense affair. Avery chatted incessantly about neighborhood gossip and her plans to redecorate the living room, barely pausing for breath. Noah ate silently, his eyes moving between his wife and son. Zach pushed his. He ate in silence, occasionally glancing up at his mother with an unreadable expression. Avery suddenly said, "I was thinking we should look into increasing your life insurance policy." Noah paused halfway to his mouth, then set the fork down slowly, fixing Avery with a steady gaze. "Why is that?" Avery laughed, the sound brittle and forced. "Well, with your job being so dangerous, I just think we should be prepared for Zach's sake." Noah echoed, his voice carefully neutral. Noah noticed Zach's shoulders tensing up when he heard his name mentioned after dinner. He and Zach went to the backyard for their nightly training session. The rhythmic thud of fists against the punching bag filled the air as Noah held it steady for his son. He reminded Noah that it's not about strength, it's about technique and precision. Zach nodded and threw a series of quick jabs. Noah watched him closely, feeling a mix of pride and concern. He'd started teaching Zach self-defense years ago, wanting his son to be prepared for anything. Now, he couldn't shake the feeling that those lessons might be more important than ever. Zach's punches began to slap, and Noah had the uneasy feeling that those lessons might be more important than ever. They called for a break and sat on the back steps sharing a bottle of water. Zach's voice was hesitant as he asked, "Can I ask you something?" Noah turned to face him. Zach seemed to struggle with his words for a moment as he faced his son, giving him his full attention. The question hit Noah like a punch to the gut. Do you think everyone could be trusted? He studied Zach's face, seeing fear and uncertainty in those young eyes. Every instinct told him to push and demand answers, but no one knew that. If he asked, it would only make Zach clam up. Instead, he took a deep breath and chose his words carefully. "No, Zach, I don't think everyone can be trusted. That's why it's important to be observant, to trust your instincts, and to always be prepared. Noah, something bad is going to happen. I know you're worried, but try to stay calm. You can come to me with anything, no matter what or who it is." Zach looked up from his training and met his father's gaze. He nodded, understanding. Later that night, Noah lay awake, staring at the ceiling beside him. Aver's breathing was too even, too measured for true sleep. His mind was racing, piecing together the day's events like a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. A soft sound from downstairs caught his attention. He listened intently. The whisper of bare feet on hardwood, the quiet click of a door closing. Avery. Noah got up quietly and waited for a minute before leaving the room. He was used to military training and was careful to avoid making any noise as he moved through the dark house. He had mentally mapped out the route he would take long ago and paused at the top of the stairs, straining his ears to hear. He could hear Avery's voice drifting up from the kitchen. Above a whisper, "Noah, listen to me. It's all set. We just need to be patient." Noah's blood ran cold. He'd heard that name before, whispered in hushed phone calls. Avery thought he couldn't hear. "Just stick to the plan," she continued. Noah had heard enough. He retreated to the bedroom, his mind racing. Noah slipped back into bed. He could still hear Avery's words in his head. "It's all set." He lay there perfectly still as Avery crept back into the room. Minutes later, she settled into bed, her breathing eventually even out into true sleep. Noah didn't sleep at all. The next morning, he went through the motions of his usual routine. He kissed Avery goodbye. The act left a bad taste in his mouth as he headed for the door. Zach's voice stopped him. "Dad, can I talk to you for a second?" Noah turned, seeing the determination in his son's eyes. "Sure, Zach, what's up?" Zach glanced nervously towards the kitchen where Avery was cleaning up breakfast dishes. He lowered his voice. "I need to tell you. Something's up with Mom." Noah's heart was pounding. He crouched down, putting himself at a level with Zach. "What about Mom?" Zach took a deep breath. His words came out in a rush. He said he'd seen her with some guy. She'd told him not to tell anyone. She said that if he did, she'd make sure Noah was gone. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Noah fought to keep his expression was neutral, not wanting to scare Zach. "When was this?" "2 nights ago." Zach whispered. "When you were working late, they were in the house." Noah's mind raced. 2 nights ago, the night before, Avery had brought up increasing his life insurance. He squeezed Zach's shoulder. His voice was low and intense. "You did the right thing telling me. I'm proud of you. Listen to me now. Don't say anything to your mother. Act normal." Zach nodded, his eyes wide. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to handle it. Don't worry." As he drove to work, Noah's mind was already formulating a plan. He had contacts. He'd use all the resources at his disposal, from his military days and his current work, to uncover the truth. By that evening, Noah had discreetly installed surveillance equipment throughout the house, cameras in the living room, kitchen and home office, and audio recorders in strategic locations. He was ready for Avery and her lover to think they could get away with it. He was watching and listening to everything that went on under his roof. Over the next few days, he saw that Avery was reading Sakaran Smiles for the masks and heard her and Tyler talking on the phone. They were saying that they needed to move faster. Tyler said to Avery one afternoon, "The policy is in place. We just need to make it look like an accident." Noah's hands clenched into fists as he listened to the recording. They were planning to kill him. He dug deeper, calling in favors from old contacts. A background check on Tyler revealed a history of fraud and financial troubles. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that made Noah's blood boil. He needed to find out if his wife and her lover were planning to murder him for the insurance money. He knew he needed hard evidence that would stand up in court. He also knew he needed to protect Zach. With grim determination, he set the final phase of his plan into motion. On that Friday afternoon, he called Zach. "Hey buddy," he said. "How about we go camping this weekend?" "Weekend just you and me?" Zach's face lit up. "Really, that would be awesome," Noah said, smiling as he ruffled his son's hair. "Go pack your bag. We'll leave in an hour." As Zach raced upstairs, Noah turned to Avery. Her smile was plastered on, but he could see the calculation behind her eyes. "Camping," she said. Her voice was sweet and syrupy. "That's so nice. You two haven't had much father." Noah nodded, his face a mask of neutrality. "We're overdue. We'll be back Sunday night." He loaded their gear into the car and his hand brushed against the gun concealed at his waist. He had a feeling he'd need it before the weekend was over. Little did Avery know, this camping trip was about to derail her entire plan. Noah Shaw was ready for whatever came next. He drove through the Texas hill country, Zach dozing in the passenger seat. The rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt did little to calm Noah's racing thoughts. He glanced at his son, a mixture of love and fierce protectiveness surging through him. A sleepy voice broke the silence. "Are we almost there?" Noah nodded. His eyes scanned the dance woods around them. "Another 15 minutes, buddy. You excited?" Zach sat up straighter, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, it's been forever since we went camping." A small smile tugged at Noah's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Long time no see," he agreed, his grip tightening. As they set up camp in a secluded clearing, Noah was on high alert. Every snapping twig and rustle of leaves set his nerves on edge. He knew Avery and Tyler wouldn't let them go so easily. They'd make their move soon, that night. As they sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Zach's voice cut in. Through the crackling flames, Noah said, "Dad, I've got something on my mind. Zach, is everything okay with you and Mom?" Zach hesitated, poking at the fire with a stick. "Is everything okay with you and Mom?" he repeated, his voice heavy with concern. "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you more than anything in this world, and I will always protect you." Noah replied, taking a deep breath and choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you more than anything in this world, and I will always protect you. Do you understand?" Zach nodded slowly, his young face creased with worry. "I know, son, and I promise you I'm handling it." "You don't need to worry about anything," Noah said, holding up a hand to cut him off. Okay, Dad," Zach replied. Noah was quiet, but seemed to trust Zach as they settled into their tent that night. He lay awake, listening to everything around them. He made sure their tent was positioned with a clear view of the approach, and his gun was within easy reach. The attack came just before dawn. Noah woke up at the sound of a twig breaking nearby. He was on his feet in an instant, gun in hand. "Zach, get up now, I've got my gun in hand." Noah blinked awake, confusion quickly giving way to fear as he registered the tension in his father's voice. "Dad, what's going on?" Dawn was breaking, and two shadowy figures were approaching. Noah's jaw clenched. This was it. "Zach," he whispered, turning to his son. "Remember what I taught you. Stay low. Stay quiet. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" Zach nodded, his face pale but determined. Noah took a deep breath, steadied himself, then burst out of the tent in one fluid motion, gun raised. "Federal agent," he bellowed. "Put your weapons down." The two men froze for a split second, caught off guard. It was all the opening he needed. He lunged at the closest attacker, driving his shoulder into the man's midsection. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Noah's military training kicked in as he grappled for control. A sharp crack split the air, and pain exploded in Noah's side. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go. He let go with a burst of strength and slammed his elbow into his attacker's face, feeling the satisfying crunch of cartilage giving way. The man went limp, and Noah scrambled to his feet, ignoring the burning in his side. He spun to face the second attacker, only to find Zach standing over the prone figure with a heavy branch in his trembling hands. Noah and Zach rushed to their son, quickly checking him for injuries. "Are you okay?" Zach nodded, his eyes wide with shock. "I hit him, Dad, like you taught me. Right, we need to deal with these two." He turned to the unconscious man. His face hardened. It's time for answers. Noah quickly bound the attacker with zip ties from his pack. Then he roused the other man who had been knocked out. The man came to with a groan, fear flashing in his eyes as he found himself face to face with a very angry Noah Shaw. Who sent you? Noah demanded. His voice was low and dangerous. The man's eyes darted around. He looked around for an escape, but couldn't find one. He slumped in defeat. Listen, we were just hired for a job. Some rich lady and her boyfriend said they wanted to scare you off or something. Noah's blood boiled. He didn't know the lady's name, but he knew the guy called himself Tyler. Bring Avery and Tyler down. That's when the idea came to him. Noah pulled out his phone, ignoring the pain from his wound. His dad Zach's worried voice pulled his attention. What are you doing? Noah put a hand on his son's shoulder and met his eyes. I'm ending this, Zach. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Zach nodded, his faith in his father unwavering. Noah dialed the last number on Avery's recent calls. Putting the phone on speaker, it rang twice before a man's voice answered. Hello, Tyler, Noah said. His voice was ice cold. What do you want? I want you to listen very carefully, Noah said, each word precise and threatening. I'm coming back to town. You and Avery are going to confess to everything. If you don't, I'll make sure you both spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders. Understand? Why? Good. Oh, and Tyler, if anything happens to my son, there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in. Oh. Noah ended the call feeling a grim satisfaction. He turned to Zach, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and fear. What's going to happen now? Noah crouched down, meeting his son's gaze. We're going to make sure your mom and Tyler can never hurt anyone again. But I need you to be brave for me. I could be brave, Dad. Pride swelled in Zach's chest. Noah's chest, that's my boy. Let's get going. We've got work to do. The drive back to Austin was tense. Noah's mind was racing. He needed backup. He needed someone he could trust implicitly. As they neared the city limits, a name came to him, Julian West. Noah pulled into a gas station and dialed Julian's number. Zach went inside for snacks. West, a gruff voice, answered. Julian, it's Noah Shaw. I need your help. There was a long pause. It's been years. What's going on? Noah took a deep breath. I saved your life. I'm calling in that favor. Julian's voice sharpened. What do you need? Noah quickly outlined the situation. Julian listened in silence, only speaking when Noah finished. Jesus, Shaw. Your own wife? Yeah, I'm in. What's the plan? Relief washed over Noah. I need you to be ready with the team when I give the signal. We take them down hard. There's no room for doubt. I'm on it, Julian said. Keep an eye on Shaw, Noah. Noah ended the call as Zach returned to the car. His son's eyes were questioning, but Noah just shook his head. Let's go home, buddy, he said. As they pulled into their driveway, Noah's stomach churned. The house looked exactly as they'd left it, peaceful and innocuous, but he knew the rot that festered inside Zach. I need you, Noah said, turning to his son. Zach nodded and went to his room to pack a bag with enough clothes for a few days. His young face was serious. Noah shook his head. Not yet, he said, but I want you to be ready just in case. Zach, whatever you hear, stay in your room until I come get you. I understand, Zach said, his voice small but determined. They entered the house and Noah's ears immediately picked up the sound. He heard laughter from the living room. His jaw clenched as he recognized Tyler's voice, mixed with the sound of a woman laughing. Come on, son, he whispered to Zach, who hesitated for just a moment before heading upstairs. Noah took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. He walked into the living room, taking slow, deliberate steps. The scene that greeted him was like something out of a nightmare. Avery sat on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, laughing at something Tyler had said. They both froze as Noah entered. His face showed a mixture of shock and fear. Noah and Avery gasped, nearly dropping their wine glasses. You're back early, Noah said. His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. Tyler was perched on the edge of an armchair, looking ready to bolt at any moment. What happened? While we were camping, Noah said, in a voice that was deceptively calm, that we had some unexpected visitors. Avery's face paled. Visitors? What do you mean? Noah's gaze locked on Tyler. Why don't you tell her? Tyler, tell her about the men you hired to kill me and my son. Tyler shot to his feet, hands raised. Now hold on a minute, sit down. Tyler's voice was tight with emotion as he sank back into his chair. Avery's composure faltered. Noah, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not sure I want to know. Noah interrupted, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a file. I know everything. The affair, the life insurance policy, the murder plot. It's all here. He tossed a file onto the table. The photos on the coffee table spilled out, along with the surveillance shots of Avery and Tyler together, documents detailing the insurance policy, and transcripts of their incriminating conversations. Avery's face crumpled. Please, Noah, I can explain. I can explain how we were willing to kill me to orphan our son for what, Avery? Avery was crying. I never meant for it to go this far, she said. Don't blame me. Tyler was shouting. This was your idea from the start. Julian, it's time to wrap this up. You're both going to jail, Noah said, cutting through their bickering. The FBI is on their way. You can either confess now or make it worse for yourselves. As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. Avery collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. Tyler made a break for the back. Noah was faster and tackled Tyler to the ground, pinning him effortlessly. You really think you can run from this? Noah growled, his face inches from Tyler. Agents. Noah stood and helped Tyler to his feet. Julian nodded at his old friend. They're allies. Yours as the agents read Avery and Tyler their rights. Noah felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Zach standing in the doorway. His small face showed fear and resolve. Noah crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling his son into a hug. Into a fierce hug. It's over, buddy, he said. It's all over. Zach's small arms tightened around him. Are you okay, Dad? Noah pulled back, looking into his son's eyes. I am now. You and me, we're going to be just fine. As they watched Avery and Tyler being led away in handcuffs, Noah felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The betrayal. The wound was still stinging, but with Zach by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next. As the sun was setting, Noah and Zach stood on their front porch watching the last of the FBI vehicles pull away. Julian approached, a grim smile on his face. We got them dead to rights, he said. With the evidence and confessions, they're looking at some serious time. Noah nodded, putting his arm around Zach's shoulders. Good. What happens now? Julian sighed. They'll be in jail, of course. You'll both need to testify. He glanced at Zach. His expression softened, but he added, We'll make it as easy on the kid as possible. Thanks, said Noah. You're welcome, said Julian. I owe you that, he said, extending his hand. Julian shook his head as he shook Noah's hand. We're even. Take care of yourself, Shaw and the boy, he said. As Julian walked away, Zach looked up at his father. Dad, what do we do now? Be okay, Zach nodded, leaning into his father's side. Together they watched the last traces of sunlight fade from the sky, ready to face whatever the future held. The courthouse loomed before Noah, its stone facade a silent witness to countless tales of justice and betrayal. He straightened his tie, glancing down at Zach, who Noah stood beside him in a suit that seemed a bit too grown up for his young frame. You ready for this, buddy? Noah asked, his voice low and steady. Zach nodded, his jaw set in a determined line that mirrored his father's. I'm ready, Dad, he replied. As they climbed the steps, reporters swarmed around them, shouting questions. Mr. Shaw, how does it feel to be? Zach, you seem pretty angry at your mother. Are you upset with her? Noah's hand tightened protectively on Zach's shoulder as he steered them through the crowd. No comment, he growled. His eyes were fixed straight ahead. Inside, they found Julian waiting for them. His face was grim but resolute. Shaw. Julian nodded, then knelt to Zach's level. Hey, kiddo, you remember what we talked about? Zach nodded solemnly. Just tell the truth, right? Julian smiled, a rare softening of his usual gruff demeanor. That's right. You've got nothing to worry about. As they entered the courtroom, Noah's eyes immediately locked onto Avery and Tyler sitting at the defense table. Avery's perfectly Her appearance was marred by dark circles under her eyes, while Tyler's once cocky demeanor had given way to nervous fidgeting. The trial preceded a parade of evidence and testimony that laid bare the depths of A and Tyler's betrayal. Noah sat stoically through it all, his face a mask of controlled emotion. Noah was furious when he heard the details of their plot. When it was his turn to testify, he took the stand. His voice was clear and unwavering as he recounted the events that had torn his family apart. The prosecutor, Mr. Shaw, began by asking, "Can you tell us about the night you discovered your wife's affair?" Noah's jaw clenched for a moment before he spoke. He said, "I woke up and found Avery's side of the bed empty. I heard her downstairs whispering on the phone. She was talking to Tyler about their next move." "What was that next move, Mr. Shaw?" Noah's eyes flicked to Avery, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "To kill me. To cash in on a life insurance policy they'd taken out without telling me." The courtroom was full of people talking about it, but the judge quickly stopped them. Mr. Shaw, the defense attorney, stood up and said, in a really smooth voice, that maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. "Maybe my clients were just discussing a surprise party for you." Noah's laugh was cold and humorless. "A surprise party that involved hiring thugs to attack me and my son while we were camping? I don't think so." The defense attorney faltered, clearly unprepared for Noah's steel resolve. As Noah stepped down from on the witness stand, Noah's eyes met Zach's. The boy gave him a small, brave smile, and Noah felt a surge of pride. They would get through this together. Zach's testimony was next. His young voice was steady as he recounted what he had seen and heard. Noah's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow as he watched his son face down the betrayal with courage beyond his years. Zach, the prosecutor, asked gently, "Can you tell us what your mother said to you about keeping secrets from your father?" Zach took a deep breath, his eyes finding Noah for reassurance before he spoke. "She said, if I told Dad, she said she'd make sure Dad was gone if she saw him with someone else. I was scared, but I knew I had to tell him." Noah's fists clenched under the table as he felt a fresh wave of anger at the memory of Ava's threat to their son. The trial went on for days, with lots of evidence and cross-examinations. Noah was a rock for his son throughout it all. His resolve never wavered. After what felt like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom erupted, but Noah remained still. Noah's eyes met Avery's for a moment. They looked across the room at each other. Noah saw the plea in her eyes, the desperate hope for forgiveness. His expression remained hard and unyielding. Some betrayals were too deep to ever forgive. As Avery and Tyler were led away in handcuffs, Noah felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Zach's tears, shimmering in his eyes. Seeing Zach's tears, Noah knew it was over. Zach said it was, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah squeezed his son's hand. Outside the courthouse, they faced the press once more. This time, Noah decided to speak. "My son and I have been through hell," he said, his voice carrying over the clamor of reporters. "But we're survivors. We'll move forward stronger than ever. That's all I have to say." He guided Zach through the crowd to where Julian waited with their car. "You did good in there," Shaw said as they approached. Noah nodded. "Thanks for everything. We couldn't have done it without you." "I just did my job," Julian said, waving off the thanks. "Take care of yourselves." As they drove home, Zach broke the silence. "Dad, what happens now?" Smiling, he replied, "Yeah, we've got each other." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Noah threw himself into creating a new normal for himself and Zach. They moved to a new house, away from the painful memories of betrayal. Noah took a leave of absence from work, focusing on helping Zach adjust and heal. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home, Zach turned to Noah with a serious expression. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Noah sat down, his coffee mug giving Zach his full attention. "Of course, buddy, what's on your mind?" Zach hesitated, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "Do you think Mom ever really loved us?" The question caught Noah off guard. He took a deep breath and thought carefully about how to answer. "Zach, I can't speak for your mom's feelings. What she did was wrong, but that doesn't change the fact that you're an amazing kid, and I love you more than anything in this world. That's what matters now." Noah gave Zach a big hug, blinking back tears. "Me too, buddy. Me too." As the days turned into weeks and weeks in a month, Noah and Zach settled into their new life. The pain of betrayal never fully faded, but it became a dull ache rather than a sharp wound. Noah threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, quickly earning a reputation as one of the best. He was one of the most sought-after security consultants in the state. He was relentless in his pursuit of justice, driven by his own experience to protect others from similar fates. One crisp autumn morning, Noah sat at his desk, reviewing files for a new client. He was deep in thought when he heard a knock at the door. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his work. Julian entered, his expression grim. Noah's expression changed. "Shaw, we need to talk." Noah's head snapped up. He was instantly alert. "What's wrong?" Julian hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This came across my desk this morning. I thought you should see it." Dressed man outside the prison. The note said, simply read, "She's not finished yet." Noah's blood ran cold. He looked up at Julian, his jaw clenched. "What is this?" Julian shook his head. "I don't know, but I've got my best people looking into it. That man she's meeting with. He's a high..." Noah stood pacing the room, his mind racing. "She's planning something, trying to get out early." "Maybe." Julian nodded. "But don't worry, Shaw, we're on top of it. I just wanted you to be aware." Noah's eyes hardened, his voice low and dangerous. "Let her try. If she thinks she can come after us again, she's in for a rude awakening." Julian studied him for a moment. "What are you thinking, Shaw?" Julian nodded slowly. "All right, what do you need from me?" "Everything you've got on this attorney," Noah said. His mind was already formulating a plan, and he wanted to know what was going on with Avery in prison. "I want daily updates on her activities. If she so much as sneezes, I want to know about it." "Consider it done," Julian said, heading for the door. He paused, turning back to Noah. "Just be careful, don't let this get to you." Noah's smile was cold. "Thanks for the concern, Julian, but I've got this under control." As Julian left, Noah sank back into his chair, staring at the photograph of Avery's face. Even in the grainy image, traces of the woman he'd once loved still remained. He loved her, but now all he felt was a cold, hard resolve. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Zach, hey buddy, listen, I need you to come straight home after school today. We need to talk." Noah was ready for this. He would end it for good. He burned the letter and photograph, watching the flames consume the evidence of Avery's latest scheme. His expression hardened. He was done being reactive. From now on, he would be 2 steps ahead, always prepared. Vigilant, the betrayal had changed him and made him more resilient than he ever thought possible. It had also shown him the strength he had and the unbreakable bond he shared with his son. Noah was betrayed once, and it would never happen again. Anyone who tried would learn why that was. They'd live to regret it for the rest of their lives as the last remnants of the photograph faded. Noah turned to the window, gazing out at the city below. A storm was brewing, and he would be ready for Zach. He wanted justice for the man he used to be and the man he had become. "Well, Cam, I thought I'd be waiting."